Hello and welcome to the Black Bay Show. My name is Blake Bettner. That's Zach Weiss.
Hello.
That's Thomas Kalara.
That's me.
We have a lot of Black Bays in front of us right now. We thought we would take the opportunity to do a little bit of a retrospective here from past to present through the lens of the Tudor Black Bay. Zach, this is a watch that has kind of followed the journey of our careers almost as we started to seriously get into this world professionally. So right around the time the first Black Bay was launching. Do you have any memories of that time?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I remember them coming out. They were announced before they were available in the US, so that was sort of like the first big thing. Everyone was totally like thrilled about the concept of it, the design of it. It came out around the same time as the Pelagos and the Heritage chronographs, but they weren't available yet in the US, but it felt the whole time like wink wink. And then of course there was the like launch in the US, which was a really, really big deal.
That's right.
And yeah, I mean, it's almost like fast forward and it's just been this like roller coaster ride of Tudor becoming one of the most sought after watch brands in the US since then, for in like that, kind of like luxury category.
Yeah, it's true. I think we take it for granted back at this time. As you mentioned, Tudor was not available in the US. That came a few years later. Certainly, when I think of the Black Bay, a watch that kind of set the tone for a lot of trends that we've seen follow through that still exist today. In a way, it kind of popularized and kicked off we're bringing back a historic design in modern form. It launched with the burgundy bezel. It had a rose on the dial. The smile, bit of text on the bottom, and of course, at a movement, things that they have since moved away from. This is kind of the closest. This is Black Bay 41 in terms of its shape and dimensions and kind of design. So obviously, it's evolved quite a bit since then. We have a selection of them on the table here, but there are a lot more than this in existence. There's chronograph lines. There are steel and gold in a variety of sizes.
A ceramic master.
Ceramic master coaxial,
Where's that one?
Thomas, you're a little bit newer into this space, but what are your memories? Like, what has the Black Bay meant to you? Is it a watch that resonated with you at all?
It has, and to your point, just a little new. But getting into watches, it was actually the Black Bay 36 that kind of got my attention, and I've always leaned towards that size, and I've always been a fan of the Explorer, and I just felt like this was the approachable, everyday wearing, nicely designed 36 millimeter watch. And this was like my introduction into the brand and kind of like put the brand on my radar, and more specifically the black dial 36 Black Bay.
Okay, so 41 was a little bit big.
Right.
I was commenting earlier, like, do you remember feeling this way when you first went hands on it? Do you remember feeling like this is a little large?
I had like I don't know. I had a thing about it, I think, when it first came out. Particularly, it was sort of tall as well. So as it was, I was aching for more watches that were underneath 40 millimeter, and at the time that was really rare. Like now we take it for granted that like there's a ton of options, including from Tudor, but from like brands in general for that 36 to 39 millimeter range. They just weren't around yet, and it was just like, oh, if only they had it. And then it was a little bit tall, and it has these sort of like large polished sides, which just sort of emphasized that to me. And I remember this was actually the first, I believe, Black Bay model I reviewed, because I think this was the first Black Bay that featured the new movement, as I recall. Maybe there was another one at the same time, but that was the first one I reviewed, and I was like, I love it all, but for the sides. And I remember I got some like really angry emails about that. But years later, especially now as a Black Bay Pro owner, which perhaps still has this issue, we could say that.
Sure.
It's I think I could come around on that. But 41 was just. It just was and still is a little bit out of my comfort zone for such a classic design.
And of course their answer to this was the Black Bay 58, which we see here, which sized it down, put it in a much trimmer case. So everything kind of made a lot more sense with this watch. And this has since spawned a variety of different variants here, some of which have been pretty surprising watches. We have the bronze one here, for instance, with the 369 dial. Different materials, surprising materials. This is still one of only two steel Black Bay 58 references. The other one looks a bit like this. It is just in the Black Bay 58 size. That has always been kind of a big surprise for me. But like, which direction have you liked seeing it go? Like, the 58 changed things, and then that kind of blossomed from there, and how we view this watch. Has it gone in a direction that you particularly, I like this, and it's kind of found its footing over here?
Yeah, I think so. I do like the 58 in blue just because it doesn't have the gilt accents there.
Yeah.
And I just wish that if they did come out with a 58 without the gilt accents and just a black dial, that would be something that check a lot of boxes for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you kind of get that with its cousin in the Pelagos, right? The Pelagos 39. Right?
Yeah,
it's
that's
kind
true.
of like more stark looking. Yeah, I think in general, like them moving into different complications and different materials. There's a Black Bay for everybody.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. It's funny because I think the most neutral Black Bay 58 that has come out is this taupe one, and of course the case is silver, which I don't think, which is still kind of weird for me to think back that. What were they? What is this? It still seems such a weird thing.
One of the most surprising watches that's just come out. Like I same thing. I kind of look at them and was like, that's such a bizarre thought. But thinking about it more in context, because the silver one and the gold one came out at the same time, and that was, I believe, 2021, which was sort of like a lost year. Globally, etc. Things were kind of spinning back up. It was a weird time. And I know that they were working on opening up their new headquarters, which is recently opened. So I kind of wonder if these were sort of transitional models meant to, fill a space of like having news, certainly interesting news, but they kind of acknowledged in their weirdness that they weren't going to be the most popular watches because at the time they were sort of transitioning factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this, the Black Bay Pro is probably a pretty good example of this and kind of the movement that they've taken. Obviously, this is the original Black Bay GMT here, which I think a lot of people levied some similar criticisms to as the original Black Bay 41. It's a bit slab-sided. Obviously, the Black Bay Pro has a little bit of that too, but it's a slightly more wearable footprint, as we've talked about at length in a number of videos and reviews. So we can link to those down below. But we haven't had them kind of right next to each other to see, and to me, it kind of drives the point home of what makes this Black Bay Pro all the more special. Honestly, I don't know if you had that thought, just kind of looking like seeing them side by side.
I think changes like as far as like numbers, if like on paper. It doesn't look like much, but in like side by side, you do see it. It is pretty significant, and I'm sure on the wrist as well, you do feel it.
Yeah. All the little other proportions also really change this. So it's not just the footprint. I mean, the dial size is probably about the same. The markers are about the same size, but look larger because they don't have surrounds. And same thing with the hands; they're all white. So like everything is bolder and larger on the Pro, which I feel like makes the dial look more compressed and just. It just tightens the whole thing up for me. I am biased. That is the one I went for. But and looking at it, it's such a beautiful.
Yeah. So this is kind of a look at where the Black Bay has been, what it's become. Where would you like to see it go from here?
I mean, me personally, it would be something along the lines of a 58 without the gilt accents. I have been wearing the bronze on the wrist for a bulk of the day. A bulk of the day here. I just think it's cool. It's a cool material. I haven't had much experience with bronze watches. The combination of the what would you call that bezel and dial color, like a lightish brown, right? Kind of.
There's a gradient kind of almost with the dial as well.
Right.
It's some very lovely tones.
Right. And I think that the 369 numerals kind of like blend in well with the circular hour plots. I do like the fact that this was the first watch that got the T-Fit clasp, so there's like a little bit of like history there as well. But I just think that for me personally, that's like my watch that kind of, or the watch that sticks out to me that's on the table.
This one's really quite the anomaly because the other bronze Black Bay Pros, or Black Bays, I should say, which are not here, those are 43, I believe. So those are really the biggest. Those are sort of like the clunky, like leaning into the like rugged, outdoorsy kind of look of those. And that's always been very popular. Yeah. This is the only one in the 58 case, only bronze one, only one with the 369 dial. There's a lot going on here that's like really, I don't know, this special.
Yeah.
God, I would love to see that dial, obviously, in a steel case as well.
Yes,
I don't know if they'll ever do that. It feels like they have rules and they stick to them.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree. This 369 dial in a regular 58 case, I think would be absolutely bonkers. I think even in bronze, I think there's a Bucarere blue edition, or that's kind of like a bluish or slate-ish kind of look to this dial. I think would work really well.
Yeah, just more versions of even this too. But the brown is great. Yeah, every time I see it,
I remember you and I going to see this in Manhattan and being kind of taken by it, and of course the clasp, which has since made its way into a lot of other watches. So, yeah.
I would love. I mean, I'm always taken by the bezel-less 36mm Pro. This is another one. When these first came out, I remember thinking like, that's so weird. Like, for them to take the Black Bay into this sort of explorer direction, drop the bezel, but keep the Black Bay name, it was just sort of surprising to me at the time. And I remember just the first time I've seen them, and frankly every time I've seen them since, particularly this 36mm model, it just is so well proportioned and sized, and you don't miss the bezel at all, frankly, on it. I don't know, there just seems like a lot of room for experimentation here. You know, I think there were some models at last Watches and Wonders with some two-tone aspects, which I believe they started bringing in some of the new movement calibers here. This one's still a 28-24. So it feels like there's a lot of room for growth in this specific variation. Though, you know, then you kind of get into like, what is the Ranger versus the Black Bay, you know, but...
Yeah, they're all kind of encroaching on these. I think they're really testing the boundaries where a lot of these watches, in the Pelagos 39 is a perfect example of that. But yeah, I think I would also like to see a lot more steel 58 options. I mean, we had so many different variants of the 41mm case, so I would like to see that.
A date that wasn't GMT. There's the steel bezel. That was the only one I think that had the date. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's another thing that's missing from the 58 line. Is a non-GMT date version, which seems like something that, you know, is logical to have. People like a date. You know.
I also think too, like the big thing when the bronze and the silver references came out was like, how is it going to patina over time? And it just seems it has been a couple years, right, since the release. I mean, they've looked like they've held up pretty well, especially the silver. I think that was like the big deal there with the 925. People were wondering, what is this? How's this watch going to patina over time? You know, is it going to tarnish? It has only been a couple of years, but I mean, that watch looks just as handsome as when it was released. So.
Well, the thing about it, I mean, I think it can and does, you know, discolor or tarnish, but it's easy to kind of give a once over and get back into a near original state, as I understand it. But I agree. I like this material. I like when they kind of are doing weird things like this. And it's, you know, I think when they're kind of at their best. So
at 925.
This in 925, 36 and 925 with a bracelet.
Oof.
That'd
be very cool. The luster of the 925, when you see it with steel, it really is different. There's just a slight tonality change there that I don't know, makes it special. It's special looking. A little bit like white gold, but a little different. Yeah,
it's quite beautiful. It's hard to kind of put your finger on, but it certainly stands apart, especially sat next to a lot of the other ones here. The Black Bay illustrious history, obviously it's meant a lot to us and probably many of you watching. Thank you for tuning in to this Black Bay
retrospective.
Retrospective. Please leave a like, share, and subscribe if you like this content. It helps us out a lot. And until next time, take care.